Frozen pizzas are a household favorite for millions of people around the world, and it makes sense. If you are looking for something that is fairly inexpensive, low effort, fast, I don't think that you can do much better, honestly. All I'm saying is that pizza is pretty awesome, and this is among the most convenient ways to eat it. Frozen pizzas started gaining popularity in the United States in the 1940s, following World War II. Soldiers were returning home from Italy, helping to make pizza popular in the country, while freezers were now starting to be found in most homes in the country. Considering freezers and pizza were both emerging quickly, it made sense for frozen pizzas to start hitting the shelves. In the following decades, multiple giant companies dedicated their resources toward producing and advancing frozen pizzas, helping it grow to an estimated $7 billion market in the US. I mean, it is like an entire aisle at the grocery store at this point. So in this video, I think it would be interesting to look at how the market has evolved by focusing on some of the biggest, most impactful frozen pizza brands. Starting off with Totino's. Now, I realize a lot of the people watching this probably associate Totino's with pizza rolls, and maybe rightfully so. Those pizza rolls may have taken over the brand to an extent, but Totino's should probably receive some more respect, considering that they were somewhat of a frozen pizza pioneer. See, even though frozen pizzas were first making an impact in the country in the 1940s, it was all on a comparatively small scale, so there were not any widely known brands until the 1960s, and Totino's was in fact that first widely known brand. Totino is the last name of Rose and Jim Totino, who opened an Italian restaurant in Minneapolis in 1951. Famously, Rose Totino even brought in a freshly baked pizza to the bank to help convince the officer to approve the $1,500 loan that they were seeking to get things started. Over the next decade, that restaurant became pretty popular and known for its pizzas, selling 400 to 500 of them a day. Selling a frozen version of their pizza that people can make at home was a logical enough idea, so in 1962 they started mass producing them to be sold in stores. Since the competition was still low and Rose had developed a positive reputation, they were able to scale the business to $10 million in sales by the end of that decade. However, in the 1970s, other companies were finally starting to enter the market and things quickly got competitive. Geno's is a name that you might not even recognize today because the brand has declined quite a bit and as of 2019 no longer makes pizzas. But trust me, this is easily one of the most significant parts to the story. Geno's was started in 1968 by Gino Paulucci. He had recently sold his previous company, Cheng, who sold Chinese food, for $63 million, which is more connected than you might think. Geno's was known for its frozen pizzas and its pizza rolls that were heavily inspired by egg rolls. Given the money that he had to invest and the appeal of these pizza rolls, it only took Geno's a few years to surpass Totino's as the new biggest name in frozen pizzas.
It's frozen. See? Geno's.
But in 1975, Rose and Jim Totino sold their company for $22 million to Pillsbury, who, by the way, is also from Minneapolis. So for Pillsbury, it was like the perfect way to expand into that frozen food section of the supermarket. Obviously, they had the resources to distribute Totino's pizza all across the country and bring it back to that #1 spot. Rose Totino became a vice president at Pillsbury and continued working to improve the recipe and introduced their patented crisp crust technology in 1979.
People love Totino's because our incredible crisp crust makes every bite better. Quite a bite better.
Moving on to Tony's, which was also started as an Italian restaurant that started producing frozen pizzas on a small scale, but everything was taken to the next level in 1970 when it was bought by a larger company named Schwan's. Now, Schwan's had started over 20 years earlier as an ice cream company and had evolved into other frozen foods. Given the rising popularity of frozen pizzas, their involvement with frozen foods, and connection to dairy, they figured that acquiring a small frozen pizza maker and scaling it could be promising. Also, 6 years after doing that, they added to the segment by starting their own brand of frozen pizzas that they named Red Baron. Clearly, that name had already been associated with the World War I fighter pilot and the thing where Snoopy would fly around on top of his doghouse, but according to the company, that name and the mascot were not directly based on either one of those. By the end of the 1970s, those two brands were making up about half of the company's sales, though unlike today, Tony's was selling significantly better than Red Baron. In fact, Tony's had become became the third most popular frozen pizza behind Geno's and Totino's, and the three of them became involved in a somewhat nasty rivalry. In 1981, there was a Tony's commercial that said, of the three leading popular pizzas, only Tony's uses 100% real cheese on all their pizzas. The others use artificial cheese made from casein, the main ingredient in some glues. It's one of those things where I don't think there's anything necessarily false in that statement, but it's almost implying that the others put glue in their pizza, which is misleading. I guess casein is a protein found in milk, so even though it is found in glue, it doesn't mean that it's harmful to consume. The Better Business Bureau said that it was misleading, and Schwann's agreed to stop making those claims. But then, around the same time, Totino's and Geno's were going back and forth with lawsuits, claiming that they were infringing on each other's patents and copying each other's box designs, so yeah, you probably did not think that the 1980s frozen pizza market was that competitive. Well, things did cool down a bit in 1985, when Pillsbury paid $135 million to acquire Geno's. It was essentially the two largest brands joining forces under the same company, where the Totino's brand seems to have been the favored one over the years. Shortly after, they rebranded Geno's Pizza Rolls as Totino's Pizza Rolls, while clearly putting more attention toward the Totino's pizza brand as well. Finally, in 2001, all of Pillsbury was acquired by General Mills, and that is where everything remains today. I know, I'm talking about a lot of different things here, so forgive me as I throw yet another brand into the mix, Tombstone, easily the most unusual name of the bunch. The pizza was named after the bar where it originated, called the Tombstone Tap, which was kind of a dark joke based on the fact that it was located across from a cemetery. That bar was started by Pep and Ron Simek, who I have to respect. Unlike everything else I'm talking about today, Tombstone became a national brand without being part of a larger company or relying on the sale of any other products to complement it. In the 1960s, they started selling pizza in their bar. It was so popular that they started selling frozen pizzas to other bars around the area and kept scaling things from there. By 1986, Tombstone had surpassed $100 million in annual sales when it was sold to a much larger company known for its cheese products, Kraft. At that point, the founding brothers stepped down from their leadership positions as Kraft took control of things. The only other thing that I want to mention about Tombstone is that in the 1990s, they started airing what I would consider to be some of the most morbid commercials with the tagline, "What do you want on your tombstone?"
What do you want on your tombstone?
Pepperoni and cheese. Tombstone pizza, Pierre!
I have to admit, that is a clever play on words, but at the same time, that might be a little heavy for a frozen pizza commercial. But they were effective. The brand only continued getting bigger, I think in part because people were so focused on those commercials. In 1992, Kraft complemented Tombstone by acquiring Jack's Frozen Pizza. It is more of a lower-end, cheaper brand, which they felt was a good balance because Tombstone is more on the upper end. But all of this seems little compared to when Kraft released their own line of frozen pizzas about 3 years later. In fact, it might just be the biggest thing to ever happen to the industry, and the final brand that I want to highlight today, DiGiorno. You might not expect to hear it talked about like this, but DiGiorno was in fact a technological advancement created through years of research and development. Unlike every other frozen pizza before it, DiGiorno featured a rising crust, complete with a special vacuum-sealed package that would keep oxygen out, allowing it to stay fresh. I cannot really tell you about the chemistry behind it, but I can tell you that it is a good thing when your product can do something that none of the others can, and the marketing for it should emphasize that fact. That rising crust might not seem like anything too impressive now, but it made it more like a pizza that you would get freshly baked from a restaurant, so that was the basis of their tagline. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno. A tagline that has been so effective that it remains unchanged almost 3 decades later. I mean, I feel like I've been hearing that on commercials for my entire life. It only took 3 years for DiGiorno to surpass all of the others and become the best-selling pizza brand in the US, a spot that they have continued to hold ever since. And for anyone watching in Canada, DiGiorno was quickly rebranded as Delicio, so you have been hearing it's not delivery, it's Delicio, up until 2023 anyway, when it was discontinued in the country. But DiGiorno wasn't the only rising crust for long. Only 1 year after its release, Schwann's, still the maker of Tony's and Red Baron, released their own brand brand of Rising Crust pizza called Freschetta, which led to a lawsuit where Kraft accused them of getting secret information about the Rising Crust by hiring someone who had previously contracted with Kraft. It was all settled without disclosing terms in 2001. Then, in 2010, it was big news when Kraft sold their frozen pizza business, which included DiGiorno and Tombstone and a few smaller ones, to Nestle for the price of $3.7 billion. I think that shows just how big all of this had gotten, and Nestle was a logical buyer. They are one of the biggest food companies in the world, and already involved in frozen meals, being the owners of Stouffer's, Lean Cuisine, and Hot Pockets. After taking control of DiGiorno, Nestle altered the recipe to reduce the sodium content in the dough and started releasing what I would consider to be gimmicky variations of it. Things like combining it with their Toll House cookies, which honestly might not have been the worst idea, or wings, spelled with a Y for legal reasons. I guess the meat didn't fully come from the chicken's wings, so they had to make an adjustment. So there you have it. That is my overview of what I believe to be the most impactful frozen pizza brands that have clearly helped shape the industry into what we know it is today. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on frozen pizzas? I know some people are going to say that they prefer them to the freshly baked ones, which is a bold opinion that I'm ready to hear about. Also, the obvious question, what is your favorite brand? Is it something that I talked about in this video today, or something that I overlooked entirely? What I mean is, when you are at the grocery store, which ones do you pass up and which ones are you searching for? Personally, I feel like DiGiorno might just be at that #1 spot for a reason. Tell me if you agree, and any other thoughts you have about frozen pizzas, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.